If someone has hacked into your system, how do you know that they've done so? It's a really interesting problem trying to figure out if someone has got into your system and what they're doing. So today, to illustrate that, I want to go through a quick Python example where you grab some passwords and then post it to a remote server, and we see how easy it is to hide code. That raises the question, what are the best ways to figure out if someone has hacked into your system? Let's get into it. Okay, great. So what we've done here is we've just grabbed the user's data from a mock database I set up called users data. This data will contain the password and username. So let's just print this to screen. Okay, great. So there we see the passwords, password A, password B, password C. So the next thing we need to do is we need a way to remove the data from this computer. So how we're going to do that is we are going to import requests in JSON, and then we are going to effectively send this data over the network to another server, and then this data has effectively been compromised and someone else has access to it. So I'm just going to post an IP address of a server that I have, just so that we can send the data to something else. I'm also just going to add the data. Best practices would be to do this as a post and send the data, but just for ease of demonstration, I'm just going to add it as a query parameter and just JSON dumps the data right there. So now we should be able to see our response. So let's jump over to our terminal. Okay, it's failing. So what's the problem? We forgot to put a question mark, which means this is actually data. So it's actually trying to go to that path. So let's try run this again. Okay, fantastic. So it's run. So now I want to head over to my server. I just SSH in. There we are. Now I want to look at the nginx logs, which is effectively the entry point for my web server, and see if it managed to grab this user password data. So let's just go and look at the end of that. There we go. As you can see, there's password A, password B, and password C there. Okay, so now that we've got a script that's clearly malicious, we are going to find a way to make it difficult to understand. So if a user came across the script, they wouldn't be able to figure out exactly what's going on. So to do that, we're just going to wrap all the code in a string, encode that in some format that isn't legible by a human, and then effectively run our own Python interpreter inside our code. So if someone came to the script, they wouldn't be able to figure out what's going on. Okay, so now we just tested our hide function works. We're just going to take our string and print it to the terminal. So now we see that that's clearly illegible, and you wouldn't be able to recognize that as code. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take that, decode it, and then run it as an evaluator. So therefore, someone looking at the script wouldn't be able to figure out exactly what's happening. So let's just quick remove the hide function, because that's not needed anymore. We can also remove the string, because that's also not needed. So we can see that we just need to test that this show works, put in our hidden bytes, and we can see, there we go, it prints the text to screen. So now all we need to do is pass that into our eval, and it will run. The important thing is we still need to have our imports, because that will just become code. It's just illegible from the outside, which is the important thing. So we just wrap our hidden in show, and we should be able to run our script, and it will send malicious data over the network, and it's worked. So I'm just going to speed through setting up a while loop, so it's just going to be a long-running process. And then after that's done, we're going to look at how you would see this process from the outside. So how someone might figure out what's going on. So we just quick running it there, and then now we're going to check all our processes. Okay, so now we're going to filter for this specific process. We know how it was run, so this is an easy filter. We just filter by the name of the script, and we should have our script there. So this is usually what a person from the outside will see. They will look through their system and see, okay, cool, I can see the script is running. But as we know in our case, when they look at the script, it's not immediately obvious what's going on. It's an interesting example of, or kind of a toy example, but it shows an interesting point of how a very simple piece of code can be illegible. Imagine you find this running on your machine. It's not immediately obvious what's going on, so you couldn't immediately figure out that it's malicious. At the beginning, it was quite clear, oh, user's data, that is my user's data, this should not be running. But when you look through your processes, you can't actually see exactly what's going on. So you actually need alternative mechanisms, and it's an interesting problem in security, figuring out what pieces of software are doing. People often sandbox them and see how they interact with their environment to actually figure out, because that's the best way to actually know. This is a tiny example, but you can imagine a huge code base doing many malicious things. It's very difficult to figure out actually what's going on if the program has intended it to be that way. In this specific case, the best way to figure out what's going on would actually be to look at the network connections. You could also reverse engineer the code, and that wouldn't be too difficult because this isn't that sophisticated. But yeah, that's all.